Good morning, Vanessa. How are you?
Good morning. I am good, thank you.
You're hailing from Colombia. Tell us more a little bit about you. I'll ask you to think maybe of three words or three numbers. What would be a brief introduction of yourself?
I am GD in Angular and Web Technologies. I am from Colombia, and I am passionate about code, the web technologies a lot. I like to work with a lot of frameworks and libraries in JavaScript and TypeScript. I I can self-describe myself as a curious and passionate person that loves the community and loves the code and enjoy to share with others.
Thank you, Vanessa. And just for those who don't know, because not everyone is aware of the Google programs, GDE stands for Google Developer Expert. And as it goes on YouTube, it's always link in the description when you want to know more about the Google Developer Expert program. And thank you for being part of that program. Tell me, what is one thing that surprised you when you started using Google technologies? Or maybe it was too challenging in some areas, or something that was surprisingly easy. Is there something that surprised you?
For example, Google has a lot of technologies and are really, really useful. The first time I know Angular was my first JavaScript framework. So I was really surprised when I started using because with only a few lines of code, I can create a really good application.
Did you explore other JavaScript frameworks? I'm an engineer by background myself, and I'm always trying out different frameworks like Vue or React. And what made you choose Angular, or when do you choose Angular versus other frameworks? Do you have some recommendations?
When I chose Angular, Vue, but I didn't know that Vue exists, and I didn't know so much about React. And that at that time, I know that Ember and Angular was a framework that we can use to create a good application. So I chose Angular because my colleagues was know a little about them, and so I tried to know it and face the challenge to learn it because Angular has a lot of things to learn. So that was a big challenge to learn all of them.
It's a perfect segue into my next question, which is about challenges. What kind of challenges did you face? Maybe can you give us one or two examples and how you managed to overcome those challenges as you were learning Angular and how to use it?
The first time, I maybe it's a common practice for developers when we have to make some requirement for the project. We search on Google, maybe on Stack Overflow, and if we found a solution, we copy and paste the code, and we didn't interiorize that knowledge. And that happens to me. The challenge was I didn't know so much from Angular, so I implemented a bad practice of it. So I have a bad performance in my application. So I have to, check in the documentation of Angular and research and Google and learn good practice of Angular in order to implement it well in my application and try to solve all the performance problems that I have.
In hindsight, what would you have done differently? Or in other words, if you were to give an advice to someone who's starting with Angular, what would you tell them to do to make sure they're not repeating the same mistakes as you did? Or maybe there's just no other way. You learn by copying and copying and pasting code, and then you learned by reading the documentation. Do you have what would you have done differently, if anything?
I learned that the good part is first check the documentation and try to follow the steps that it mentions and practice the little examples that it had because it's a really good helps in order to create the application. And sometimes we check so fast and didn't read quickly all the things that the documentation had. So the first advice I always say to every person and start with Angular or any library or any framework is checking the documentation and learn the basic things. If you are a web developer, learn the basis of the web because with that you can change the framework or library easily, and you don't have problems later with performance or maybe other things that we have to solve in this career.
That's fair. Is that the reason why you started sharing your own knowledge by writing blog posts, or is there another reason why you started writing these posts to share your knowledge?
Well, for me, it was really difficult to learn Angular. And because at the beginning, I don't have a solid basis of the web. So first I learned and I had to have a good basis of that. And then when I was learning Angular, I always have to research something because sometimes I didn't find the thing that I needed on the documentation. So I had to look in some blogs or look in Google and some books in order to solve my requirements. And then I started taking some notes. So I decided then start to write in order that maybe other people have the same needs than I had. So maybe they can find something that can be useful for them in my articles.
So our teams at Google, as you know, have selected your content, that is showcasing your content and linking to your blog posts. I noticed that these posts are written in Spanish, which is likely your mother tongue, and I'm very pleased to see content that is not just in English, because just like you, I am not an English native speaker. What prompted you to write in Spanish? Do you feel there's not enough content in Spanish, or it's just more natural that way? What do you think?
Well, there are a lot of content in English in Angular. So I decided to write it in Spanish because, for example, here in Colombia, there are a lot of people that don't know the English, and it's really hard for them to learn it. So in Spanish, they have a resource to learn that framework because sometimes the people say, no, Angular is not good because it's hard to learn. So that was the thing that helped me to take the decision to write it in Spanish and write about Angular because for that comments give me that idea in order to break the chains that we have with the language and we have with the wrong ideas about the framework. And in my articles, I try to write at a different way. It's not all technical. I am trying to use some analogies and I try to use some illustration like cartoons in order that the people can find something that is funny, or maybe if you check my article, so then I use the Angular logo and put some I use it like a cartoon. So it's main characteristic of my articles. I try to the people feel confident with them.
What is your inspiration to write your next blog post? Sometimes people can be a little bit stuck if they want to be like you, maybe to share their knowledge. How do you get your inspiration? Initially, you said, oh, you wrote notes as you were learning Angular. What is your inspiration today? How do you know what you're going to write on over the next few weeks and months?
Well, my inspiration was, for example, maybe a new feature or Angular, or maybe a need that some developer asked me on Twitter because some people that follow me on Twitter wrote me and asked me about where they can look for something, and based on that, I decide to maybe be inspired to write the next article, maybe in best practice or something related with the architecture. And sometimes I am inspired in my own needs. For example, I am making a course or training, I take some notes. I decide to share that because maybe it will be useful for someone. And I can check my notes. Maybe if I forget a special detail, I can check quickly there. Or people can sometimes people wrote me then maybe I love this article, maybe you think to write, I don't know, maybe about the routing or maybe of the components or something like that. So those kind of things inspire me to write my articles.
I'm curious, you talk about note taking. Do you have a special method or a tool or an app that you use to collect your notes?
Well, I use the basic things. Sometimes I only use sticky notes and on the computer, or I use Google Doc and start to write in there. Or sometimes I use my notebook, because in my notebook I can make a sketch quickly or something. If I have my map, I can do it there as app. And so if I use maybe an application, maybe I'm going to take our time, I'm going to lose the idea. So I am the basic things to write my notes.
And the good thing about a notebook is that it works without any battery and in direct sunlight, right? There's the restriction.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Vanessa, what is the next thing that excites you about Angular or about any other piece of Google technology? Something that's coming up, something that you've heard about but haven't tested yet? Is there something that you're looking forward to try and learn more?
Well, Google had a lot of things. And for example, the data science is the new thing that people are talking about. And I found that it's really useful to learn about machine learning or something like that. So I am looking on Google some training course, and I know that Google have new certificates, even though for the web. Recently I found that Google released some certificates, so I want to, it's at the basis, but all the basic thing about the web, but it will be good to know if I know everything or I need to maybe fill in some gaps. So the next step that I want to try is learning of the documentation and prepare for maybe a certificate for the web, or start to learning about machine learning, because it would be good to try something, or maybe try to know other web TensorFlow or Firebase in order to join with Angular in some way and make a really good application with that.
Yes, machine learning is undoubtedly transforming many industries. In fact, I just did an interview with another author, another contributor to Dev Library, Sayak. So in case people are interested, they can also check out this video interview. And one of the open source projects we selected in his case was a blood cell detection model. So it's very interesting using TensorFlow. So if you're curious, you can also check out how he's using some ML APIs and a TensorFlow model. Vanessa, what is the worst piece of advice you've ever heard in our industry of developers and coders? Is this something that whenever you hear it, you think, you're rolling your eyes and you think this is terrible? Why are people saying this? Is there anything like that?
Well, the worst, I try to don't think about the worst thing, because as a developer, every day we are learning. So we have constantly making mistakes, because we learn from the mistakes. So we maybe the worst was related with the feedback that we have to listen for our colleagues, because we don't know how to make a good feedback sometimes. Maybe when you are making some code review, you are hearing a bad comment that you code is like spaghetti code and it's awful, and you have to learn good practices and all those kind of things. So I think that the words maybe is well related with that kind of comments, because all in the life is a learning. So well, as a developers, we are constantly doing that. So maybe the worst thing that I heard was related with that.
So you would encourage people to know how to give feedback instead of criticizing when people are actually learning. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because as I said, we don't know how to make a good
I
feedback,
see.
and sometimes we think or we think that maybe if we are criticizing something someone about the code, about their performance of their job, we are making good, but we have to learn how to make it good in order that the other people learn instead of the people feel frustrated.
That makes sense. Any final few words that you'd like to share with fellow developers to inspire them, or pieces of advice you'd like to share with them? Any final few words?
Share to the community is really nice, and all the things that we are learning, maybe sometimes without that are basic things, and we don't know nothing to share with someone, but it's not true. All the things that you are learning, you can share with the community, and try to do it, because that way not only you help to someone, you are helping to you, because that way you are learning more.
Two things, Vanessa. You're talking about the community. If people want to join a community, how would they go about it? Where should they start? Do you have some practical tips? Where can they find a community?
In case of Google, there are a GDG community, that is a Google Developer Group. In a lot of cities, there is a GDG, but a lot of cities has a lot of software developer communities. Communities from Angular, from Android, for Kotlin, machine learning, and other Google technologies, instead of basis of the web, front end, back end. So you can look maybe in your city. You can look for a common page is Meetup. On Meetup, there are a lot of communities there. You can look and check for any community near to you, and join to the community and start to sharing with the people, and make a talk, because if you make a talk that helps you to improve your soft skills and your technical skills. So I can tell you that look at Google or look at Meetup, because I didn't know so much other website related with communities, but those are maybe Meetup is more common, and Google is the more confident resource that we have to look for anything.
And in most cases, if not all cases, joining a community is free, right? There's no barrier to entry, so you can join online or face to face. One last thing I wanted to bounce back on is when you said something along the lines of by sharing with the community, this is a good way to learn, and it's totally true, right? It has been shown that when you're learning something, if you repeat it and you use your own words and you try to share it with others, then you probably understand it even better, because you've been able to rehash it and share it with others. Thank you very much, Vanessa. And I look forward to what you're going to share next in terms of blog posts and what you're going to play with, whether it's machine learning or web. Thank you again.
Thank you for this opportunity, and to let me to share my articles, and the people know about them, and I like them. Other people started sharing their knowledge of their article of the open source project, because that way we can increase it in our community, and we have more resources for all the people to learn.
Thank you.